Welcome to the first episode of Tokyo Weekender Business Insiders. I am very, very pleased to present to you today Mike Eidlin, the CEO and founder of Walala, which is a cream made with CBD oil infused into it. And today he's going to introduce us to CBD oil in general and talk a little bit about how it is in Japan to be at the forefront of this booming industry worldwide. And well, Mike, thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Great. First off, I wanted to ask you just a little bit about your background, how you got into this industry and what you did before this industry.
Yeah, definitely. So this product, brand, company is kind of a reflection of myself as well, and my upbringing, my background. I was actually born in Tokyo, and I was raised in California, Northern California, and yeah, Walala is a CBD-infused, right now, skincare brand. And it's interesting because, you know, in California, cannabis is highly regarded, respected, and well-tolerated and used, right? Whereas in Japan, it's highly illegal. It's essentially the opposite. And cannabis usage and possession will land you in jail here. And so I grew up with this kind of like cognitive dissonance, right? Where it's, you know, it's so well used in California, but it's just so bad here. And so to a certain degree, like I sort of want to fix that, you know, that difference and the misunderstanding that exists when it comes to the plant, right? And so I studied economics and Japanese at UC Davis in California, and my first job was actually at Citigroup in Tokyo on the trading floor. So I did a summer where I wore a suit every day, arrived at the office at 6 a.m., left at 9 p.m. Very stressful, kind of lifestyle, which most Japanese men and women, experience. And it was so different from my upbringing and my lifestyle back in California. And so as a result, I decided not to pursue a career in finance in Japan and instead moved back to California. And I started working on mobile apps and doing startups there. And I did that for 4 years, raised money from VCs, venture capitalists, and angel investors in Japan and California. And after 4 years, I decided to kind of create a new company, which was this. Around last year, I received a call from a previous angel investor asking if CBD was legal in Japan. I started doing my research and eventually landed upon this project.
So CBD in general, it's become a big thing abroad. I mean, I've seen water with CBD in it. I've seen oils being sold. Even some places in Japan, you can actually find the oils for consumption. And now you have cream. So what exactly are the effects that CBD has on your body? And are there any differences when you ingest it versus when you put it on your skin, for instance?
So I'm going to rephrase your question. Let's just start with what is CBD?
Let's start with that.
Right.
Okay.
So CBD is a nutrient that comes from the cannabis plant. The cannabis plant, aka marijuana, has two main kind of ingredients that humans tend to go for. One is THC and one is CBD. THC, when ingested, actually gets you high, right? And so in many countries, the THC molecule is regulated and is illegal or, heavily regulated, right? And CBD is a bit of a more kind of recent discovery. It's been known for a long time that CBD existed, but scientists and researchers didn't really realize that CBD actually had effects as well. And so when we talk about the CBD molecule, you can actually, as you mentioned, ingest it through your mouth or put it on your skin, similar to vitamin C, right? There are vitamin C infused serums now, but there are vitamin C capsules and supplements. So what effects does CBD have, right? CBD, when ingested through your mouth or lungs, enters your bloodstream and then eventually goes to your brain. And it interacts with what's called the endocannabinoid system, which is similar to the nervous system that we have. And the simple explanation is that it regulates homeostasis in your body. So it kind of helps your body balance kind of its general health and well-being, right? And so what I like to usually say also is that CBD is really good at taking like a minus state and bringing it to zero, but not really that good at taking it from a zero state to like a positive state. That's kind of what THC does, right? And so I like to compare CBD to green tea and THC to red wine, right? You might take CBD in the morning, but if you're taking THC in the morning, you're probably not going to get a lot of work done, right? And so now let's talk about the specific effects. CBD, when ingested through the mouth or the lungs, you can smoke it, vaporize it, or you can kind of eat it, drink it, swallow it. Can not necessarily will, but it's different for everybody. Kind of help with your anxiety or your depression. Maybe it helps you sleep a little bit better. Maybe you have chronic pain and it helps alleviate that a little bit, right? And so those are kind of just, I would say, somewhat casual uses. CBD actually became very popular in the mid-2000s because it was created into sort of a medicine for this little girl, Charlotte, who suffered from, I think it's called Dravet's syndrome, which is essentially like child seizures, where children have seizures like 100 times a day.
Oh.
And the parents of Charlotte, gave her all sorts of drugs and couldn't figure it out, with obviously the help of doctors. And the mom eventually landed on medical marijuana, right? And realized that a strain that had a high CBD content actually helped her alleviate her seizures. And that's when people started to realize, oh, CBD might actually have kind of a benefit in itself, right? And so that is like the official FDA regulated use, and that turned into...
So it actually has an FDA regulated use
Yes.
in America. Okay.
Yeah, and that turned into a drug called Epidiolex or Epidiolex. It's really kind of hard to pronounce.
Okay. And that you can actually go and get prescribed, you're saying?
Yes, but only for children who have 100 seizures a day.
Only for children too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's interesting that, or actually, maybe for adults, but it's to treat seizures.
Sure.
Yeah, and this is kind of specific disease.
And the main ingredient to that is CBD.
99% CBD.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's interesting. There's an FDA-approved drug for it, but it's also used as a cosmetic ingredient in the United States, and also as a health supplement or an ingredient for foods, right? And so we talked about what happens when you kind of take a little bit of CBD into when you ingest it, but if you apply it topically, it has anti-inflammatory effects. And when you use cosmetics, the active ingredients of the cosmetics penetrate your skin into the epidermis and either will, hydrate your skin, and that's why they're moisturizing, etc. But CBD, when it hits that area of the skin, it reaches the same endocannabinoid system, aka similar to the nervous system, and will kind of give it anti-inflammatory signals, right? Which also then contribute to pain relief and kind of relaxation of the tendons, the joints, and sometimes the muscles. And so you'll see professional athletes in the United States use CBD as part of their recovery process a lot. You'll see a lot of pro golfers being sponsored by CBD brands now.
Is that right?
Yeah, and
Wow.
MMA fighters, etc. as well. And so it's interesting. They'll use it topically, but they'll also use it, they'll ingest it.
So in most of those sports circles, it's not necessarily part of the banned substances list?
Yeah, so this is also very interesting.
Okay.
The World Anti-Doping Association, WADA, actually okayed CBD.
Really?
Yeah, in I think 2018 or so.
Wow.
THC is still banned. And you also have to be very careful here because the other cannabinoids, in addition to THC and CBD, there are other cannabinoids that exist called CBG, CBC, CBN, CBDD, et cetera, right? Those are actually still banned by WADA.
Okay.
And just upon this line, when it comes to CBD products, there are 3 categories that you should kind of know about. One is called full spectrum CBD, another is broad spectrum CBD, and another is CBD isolate.
Okay.
CBD isolate base products, are essentially just CBD. Okay. When you create CBD products, which might include CBD oil or CBD-based drinks, etc., you essentially kind of squeeze the cannabis plant, and a lot of kind of juice comes out of it,
Sure.
right? And a full spectrum kind of blend or full spectrum CBD product is essentially just squeezing it, and it includes everything like the healthy fats, the polyphenols, the other flavonoids, the other terpenes, et cetera, et cetera.
Does that include the THC as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So full spectrum includes THC.
Mm-hmm.
Broad spectrum is full spectrum minus THC.
Okay.
Right. And so you have full spectrum products, broad spectrum products, and CBD isolate. So if you're an athlete that's regulated by the World Anti-Doping Association, you can only use CBD isolate products.
Interesting.
If you use broad spectrum, it might not have THC, but it might have CBN or CBG, which will get you in trouble per WADA's rules.
Sure.
There's another important point that I really want to make sure that people understand is, drug tests, right? Drug tests exist in various forms. And there are times that when people who use CBD or ingest CBD might get caught with THC-related drug tests.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason for that is if you unknowingly take a full spectrum CBD product, you think it's just CBD, but it actually has some THC in it,
Sure.
then you'll get caught there. Another is that some of these drug tests don't specifically test for THC or CBD. They test for metabolites that are created when you ingest THC or CBD.
Like an antibody for a virus, you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
So you can take a pure CBD product, but the metabolite that gets created from that CBD product is similar to the THC metabolite.
Okay.
And that test only tests for the metabolite.
Right.
And so that is also something to be careful of.
Okay.
So
and that you will basically be caught on that even if you take an isolate. Is that what you're saying?
depending
on the test.
The test,
Right.
yes.
So basically, I understand that there are a lot of products on the Japanese market, but what is the legality behind CBD in Japan?
So when it comes to the regulation and legality of CBD in Japan, it's a little complicated.
Okay.
And there are two kind of main elements that we need to focus on. One is the actual CBD molecule, and the other is the source of the CBD molecule, which usually is the cannabis plant.
Okay.
And so the regulating body here is the MHLW, which is the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare,
Okay.
Kousei Roudou in Japanese.
Okay.
And they actually issued a 4-page kind of PDF, which you can find on their website here.
Oh, wow. All right.
And basically in here, there are two main rules when it comes to kind of CBD and the regulation. One is that it cannot contain, the CBD product that you're trying to import or raw material cannot contain any THC in it.
So no broad spectrum is what you're saying?
No full spectrum.
I'm sorry, full spectrum.
Yes,
right,
no full spectrum CBD can come into Japan, right? Broad spectrum does not contain THC, so in theory, for that requirement, it's okay.
Okay.
The second requirement is that the CBD product must be derived from the stems and the seeds of the cannabis
The
plant.
stems and the seeds, so no flowers is what
No
you're saying?
flowers, no
buds.
leaves, and no roots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is the Cannabis Control Act, I believe it was 1946 or 1948. There's kind of a line in there that says, or a clause that says, any product created from the cannabis plant is illegal except for the stems and the seeds of the cannabis plant.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. There's a common spice in Japan called shichimi togarashi,
Yes. Yes.
and it has an ingredient called asanomi, which is called another way of saying it is hemp seeds.
Right. Right.
And traditional kimonos or ropes or hemp-based T-shirts, etc., are legal in Japan because they are created from the fibers that are in the stems and stalks of the cannabis plant.
Okay, so there's a lot of cultural things behind having those two parts still be legal.
Yes, exactly. And there are actually in Tochigi-ken and Hokkaido, there's still hemp that's being grown for cultivation of the stems and the seeds.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's really interesting, right? And so coming back to the legality here,
Yes.
right? Just to summarize, the CBD product that you want to, or raw material that you want to import into Japan cannot contain THC, and it must come from the stems and the seeds of the plant. So last year when I decided to embark upon this project, I started calling CBD producers in the United States and some in Europe. And I said, hey, I want to purchase CBD that is derived from the stems and the seeds.
Right.
I'm going to import it in Japan, which is still a brand new market, so I want to buy a lot.
Right.
And 10 out of 10 companies I spoke with, they essentially laughed at me. They said, We throw away our stems and seeds.
Oh, okay.
Or there's no CBD in the stems and seeds.
I was going to ask you that. So is there actually CBD in either of those parts?
So I essentially said, what's going on then? I even asked the folks, like, but the Japanese laws state that it's okay, right? So it must exist. And they said, okay, maybe the law states that, but like we're the pros here, and we're telling you that there's no CBD in the stems and the seeds. And it's kind of comparable to saying, we're going to return back to vitamin C. Does vitamin C exist in the stems and the seeds of the lemon tree, right?
That's a good question.
It definitely exists in the fruit, right, of the lemon. But what about the stems and the seeds of the lemon tree? Is kind of one way of looking at it.
Sure.
Another good one is I like to, when I explain this to kind of Japanese business people here that I interact with, let's say there's a magical world or an alternate universe in Japan where red wine is highly illegal because it gets you drunk. And when you get drunk, that's bad for society. And so there's the Red Wine Prohibition Act or something like that, right? And someone comes along and says, hey, my red wine comes from the stems and the seeds of the Vitis vinifera, which is the grape plant.
Sure.
You'll instantly know that, like, hey, that's probably not real,
Of
right?
course, of course.
It comes from the fruit. And so in the same way, the THC and CBD nutrients come from the fruit of the cannabis plant.
Sure.
Not the stems and the seeds, right? That's just one way of thinking about it.
Okay.
But now let's talk about like the facts, right? There's actually a few studies that came out saying, hey, there's some contamination of hemp seed oil where THC was detected in the hemp seed oil.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. And so what's going on there? Well, this is quite interesting. Also,
another
in this
study
paperwork here. I like to be as much as possible kind of fact and evidence based, right?
Of course.
And so this is actually a kind of public opinion by the DEA and DOJ of the United States, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency, that states, and this is online as well, so anyone can fact check this, that according to the scientific literature, I'm just going to kind of read it word for word, cannabinoids are not found in the parts of the cannabis plant that are excluded from the CSA definition of marijuana, except for trace amounts, typically parts per million, that may be found where small quantities of resin adhere to the surface of seeds and mature stalk.
Okay.
So what that's saying there is, if there is cannabinoids, like CBD, on the stems and the seeds of the plant, it's because they kind of fell from the bud and the flowers and are on the outside.
So it's like the pollen or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's like the pollen. That's a great way of putting it. Thus, based on scientific literature, it is not practical to produce extracts that contain more than trace amounts of cannabinoids using only the parts of the cannabis plant that are excluded, such as oils from the seeds. So the official opinion of the Department of Justice and the Drug Enforcement Administration of the United States states that it's not practical to create extracts, cannabinoid-based extracts from the stems and the seeds of the plant. Right. So kind of upon this realization, I was like, okay, what's going on? Right. And this is where it gets a little tough because, if you provide paperwork that states your product comes from the stems and seeds to the Japanese government, they kind of they can't do anything except to okay it.
Sure, they can't check.
Yeah. And the reason is, if you have a CBD molecule, in theory, you can't tell where it comes from.
Right.
So there's no test that says whether this CBD molecule from the stems and the seeds of the plant, or whether it's extracted from the flower or the bud. There are ways to tell whether this group of, like, let's say this tincture or this, CBD product has THC in it.
Right. Or any of the other cannabinoids.
Exactly. Right. And so, this is going to sound a little harsh, but essentially, when it comes to, per the scientific literature, per the data, per the studies, there's no CBD in the stems and the seeds of the plant.
Right.
And therefore, people must be providing falsified paperwork.
Sure. Okay.
When it comes
that makes
to
sense.
importing naturally based CBD products. And there's also kind of precedence here as well. I won't kind of show the paperwork too much here because it sort of kind of incriminates another brand. But there was a global brand that's listed on a stock exchange elsewhere that created a Japanese subsidiary, which released a press release saying our products were being imported into Japan, following like an internal compliance check that were not compliant with Japanese laws regarding the stems and the seeds.
Okay.
So a public cannabis-oriented company issued this press release. And when they did that, their stock crashed 10% or so, right? So there's precedents that other companies that previously were doing that, you know, because they are a public company and you can only get away with it.
You can't hide it. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Kind of decided to fix that, right? And so what's the solution, right? I thought to myself, okay, I want to create the CBD company, but I don't want to lie to the Japanese government.
Sure.
That'll get me in a lot of trouble. My mom won't be happy about that. And I started doing some research. And what I concluded was that there are two other ways of creating CBD. So there are three ways in total right now. One is through just deriving it from hemp or cannabis naturally, right? And one is chemical synthesis, and the other is what's called biosynthesis or cellular agriculture. There's such a thing called chemically synthesized or organically chemically synthesized CBD. And I started doing more research, and I thought to myself, like, what is this sketch? Is this real? Is this safe? Et cetera, et cetera. What it turns out is this technology was actually first discovered in the 60s by a researcher named Professor Meshulam at Hebrew University in Israel. And he essentially discovered how to synthesize CBD in addition to THC, et cetera. Basically, you just use organic chemistry to create this compound. And so many compounds, essentially organic chemistry has existed for hundreds of years, right? And that same technology also exists in the cannabis space. And so my conclusion, it was essentially that in order for CBD to be 100% legal in Japan, it has to be synthesized. And we even had our kind of our lawyers write up, I have it here as well, but an opinion letter stating that chemically synthesized CBD does not kind of apply to the Cannabis Control Act in Japan. And therefore, that's how we can claim that our CBD is 100% legal.
So lastly, I just want to ask you about your product itself. In Japanese, it's Walala. Not sure how you pronounce it in English, but it's an absolutely beautiful design you have here. And I understand that you actually designed it yourself.
Yes.
And so how do you use this exactly?
So I want to just start from the name first. You know, Walala is actually taking the Japanese concept of wa, like harmony. And LA is a nod to the kind of Los Angeles, the health and wellness culture that usually stems from, you know, Santa Monica and Venice, et cetera, where I was living before I moved here. And so that's kind of where the name comes from, Walala. And the reason is because this product is actually made in Japan. And so we're proud to be able to say we're the first 100% legal CBD product that's made in Japan, right? Japan has a very well-respected cosmetics market. And you know, California has, you know, the top research when it comes to cannabis, and so that's kind of part of our brand. Would take the best-in-class research when it comes to cannabis and the best-in-class cosmetics in the world, aka, you know, J Beauty, as they say, and we created a product. So the first product we created is this CBD point cream, and we actually called it a point cream instead of a kind of body cream because we want our consumers to use this on various specific points of their body. And the reason for this is that you know, CBD has anti-inflammatory effects, and it works well on, you know, the joints and tendons of your body and specific points. We're selling this for 7,500 yen, which is roughly around $75 US. And so if you kind of use this, there's 50 grams in this cream all over your body. You know, there's some people who can afford to do that, but we would rather have you use it on parts of your body that need that TLC, tender loving care, right?
Not THC.
Not THC. Yeah. And so, you know, the way some people use it are, we've had customers put it on their jaw before going to bed, and it helps with their TMJ or teeth grinding.
Oh.
We've had people use it on their face, and it helps with anti-inflammation for their face and kind of shrinks their pores. When I lived in LA, I would surf. And so I would use a different product than ours because we hadn't even created this yet, but on my shoulders, and it would help before I go to bed. You know, women, when they wear heels, it tends to cause swelling in their feet and it hurts, right? So CBD creams can be good for putting on your heels after a long day, et cetera, right? And so it's various points, specific points and joints of your body that we want you to use this. And so this is our first product. We're also going to be creating a product for the face later. I can kind of show you guys as an exclusive. This is our, still a prototype, but our CBD booster serum. And so we want our customers to use this on their face after they wash their face before the moisturizing step, in order to get the CBD into the skin under, you know, on your face, right? And it helps with turnover, helps with the anti-inflammatory element. So yeah, it's really, I feel like it's pretty exciting stuff.
I want to thank Mike from Walala. Thank you very much for taking the time to, you know, sit down and have a nice chat with us. I want to also thank Eat Play Works, this beautiful location in Hiro, for letting us use this absolutely stunning place here. And you can find Walala products at walala.jp. That's WALALA.jp. And pretty soon in November, you'll be able to find them in certain Tomorrowland stores in Tokyo and Osaka. Thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you soon.